Worcester, a great day for us all, great day for Major Taylor. Fantastic monument. I was really blown away by the scale of it, and the grandeur of it is incredible. So what to say? Difficult to know what to say. I've been investigating, dealing with, living with Major Taylor for 32 years now. So it has to be something of a climax in a way. Hard to know. I was sitting at home in Berkeley looking at my files, which are compendious, and hard to know what to choose. So I'm just going to I decided in the end just to pick a few little items to talk about in a kind of because I've got 10 minutes and I can't speak too long. Looking back over the period, it's sort of hard to know and to understand where I was right at the beginning of the whole research process. And I have all my papers, and I went through my file of 1975. I had just got back to Berkeley from London. I had just published a book on history of bicycle technology, and I got hold of a copy of Major Taylor's own book, the autobiography. And I thought, well, this is an interesting story, and I started poking around and writing letters. Here's a letter I wrote to the state of Indiana State Library, or their response rather. Dear Mr. Ritchie, we have not located much information about Marshal Major Taylor. We are enclosing photocopies of 2 newspaper articles, which is the extent of our findings. One of them was a little article that said that Mrs. Sidney Taylor Brown had been invited to present the prizes for some kind of a bicycle race. And that was the first inkling that I had that Major Taylor had a daughter named Sidney. And I went to the phone book, and there were 2 S.T. Browns in Pittsburgh, and one of them was Sidney. So I fired off a letter subsequently to Sidney after talking to her briefly on the phone. So here it is. Here's the letter. She says, "Yes, I'm Major's daughter, retired social worker. Fire away with the questions. I am at this telephone number usually after 11 p.m. That was Sidney in those days. She raced around. I'm repeatedly being frustrated and angered because credits due Dad are usually missing in the many recently published books on cycling. He was," etc. And then she goes into describing who he was. And that was the beginning of my contact with Sidney. And I know some of the Taylor family members are here. Sidney was fantastic to me. She drove me around Pittsburgh in her big old car. I interviewed her at her dining room table. I have the tapes still. The phone was constantly ringing. She'd say, "Oh, that must be another of my girlfriends." And then she'd get into a 5-minute conversation with somebody who wanted something, or she had to reply to some request that had previously been made. Anyway, I went back 3 times to Pittsburgh, and that was sort of the basis of my research. And she opened her house and basically opened her heart to me, and made Major Taylor's scrapbooks and memorabilia available. That's the material that's now in the Indianapolis State Museum. So that's my first little point. And thanks to Sidney and thanks to the family for that welcome, that welcome that made my writing the book possible. The second thing is this rather extraordinary picture from the cycling magazine Bearings that is really the first entry point of a very, very young Major Taylor into the white cycling world. This is 1897 Boston Pursuit race, which is documented in the book. It was a time trial, basically. The 2 teams of 5, one on either side of the track. They each had to overtake the other, and it was against a team from Philadelphia, and it was very much a city versus city event. He tried out. He was among the 5 fastest. He got on the team. The other 4 members were Frank Butler, Burns Pierce, Nat Butler, and Eddie McDuffie. So there they are. They welcomed him on the team. Perhaps it wasn't easy for them. but it was a breaking point in American cycling. That picture is an extraordinary picture. I don't believe that it's the first photograph of an integrated sports teams in American sport history, because I believe there are integrated baseball teams before that, but certainly a very, very significant photo for American cycling. That's Bearings magazine, 1897, out of Chicago. I haven't discovered ever an original photo of that, only this one that I copied. The second photo I took from my photo file is this wonderful picture, which is, I've never seen an original poster. I got a color slide of this. This is later in Major Taylor's career, probably around 1902, 1903, but very much a presentation of a media picture of Major Taylor in Europe, representing America, framed as he is by the Stars and Stripes there. As I say, I've not seen an original. I don't know where I think the original is somewhere in Paris, but it's a wonderful image of Major Taylor's international sporting career, but also an image that reinforces the next picture I want to hold up, which is about Major Taylor and the bicycle industry, which is really quite significant and not really discussed. It was, Major Taylor had enemies and he had friends. The bicycle industry was essentially Major Taylor's friend and made his entry into the sport possible. And it's at that point that I would like to hold this up. This is Cycle Age and Trade Review from October 18th, 1900. He was on the front page of this magazine for several issues at the point where he was really making news in the sport. Interestingly enough, it wasn't the World Championship that made the loudest noise, but his winning of the American Championship. Here, he's sponsored by Ivor Johnson Arms and Cycle Works, Fitchburg, Massachusetts, who put money into promoting him and then paid for these ads on the front page of this Chicago cycling trade paper. So once again, a very significant paper for a very significant item for emphasizing the fact that his career was essentially made possible by the promoters who put money into believing in his athletic ability. So I thought that this was a significant point to make. And the other thing is a newspaper item from the Fort Wayne, Indiana News, July 28th, 1900, which was entitled "The Fastest Cyclist in America." And there are several people talked about Bernie Munger, and obviously Bernie Munger is a very critical, crucial figure in Major Taylor's life and career. And this is very interesting because it kind of describes the course, the progress of Major Taylor's life. And I'll read just two extracts from it. This is describing his early career. At that time, Munger hired Taylor to act in the capacity of his valet, and the faithful lad soon became a favorite among the wheelmen. He was as faithful and conscientious about the servile duties of those days as he is in his training today, and his promptitude to obey orders and perform his light tasks soon won him the name of Major, which is inaccurate, of course, but that's how they understood it. In a joking way, he was placed on an old racing wheel of Munger's and started around the track with a number of the fast men. Well, it's not quite accurate, but... So then on the second page, Munger soon saw that the little colored boy he had picked up in New York was the coming cyclist of the day, and gradually the positions of the two changed until now. Taylor, instead of blacking the boots of his former employer, is the source of his income and is carefully looked after by the man who was at one time a star in cycling circles. So Taylor and Munger changed places. Very significant. And I think that's what. Oh yes, the last thing I had to say is this, of course. Major Taylor's own book, which he struggled with at the end of his life. This is not the original dust jacket. My original dust jacket fell apart, and so I Xeroxed it. But probably many of you have seen the book. This is the book he wrote and self-published, 1929, and which can still be found if you've got a buck or two. And I just wanted to read a couple of things from the foreword to the book. That Major Taylor understood at the end of his life, or as he obviously didn't know when the book was published, that his life would end 3 years later. He died 1932. This book was published 1929. But I believe his educational message, or his message to us, is contained in some of the words of the foreword. And I would just like to close with reading a couple of these words. These reminiscences, covering the most colourful chapter in all the history of bicycle racing, brings out very clearly many of the outstanding qualities characteristic of my race, such as perseverance, courage, and that marvellous spirit of forgiveness. It also proves to the world literally that there are positively no mental, physical, moral, or other attainments too lofty for a Negro to accomplish if granted a fair and equal opportunity. The primary object of this narrative, however, is not for any personal glory or self-praise, but rather to perpetuate my achievements on the bicycle tracks of the world for the benefit of all youths aspiring to an athletic career, and especially boys of my own group as they strive for fame and glory in the athletic world. It's a pretty remarkable message to leave behind.
Yeah.